John, do you have to like a band to produce them, or can you produce somebody that you don't really like?
No.
No to which? No, you don't have to like them, or...
I wouldn't produce them unless I liked them, or unless I felt I could contribute something, or I felt I could give them guidance. I mean, you know, if I don't like the music and they're in the studio and they do a take, when the music stops and it all goes quiet, they're going to look at me and say, "What do you think?" And if I don't like them, I'm going to go, "I don't like it." So there's no point in carrying on, no, even starting it, really.
Is there something about, like, the manicness in which bands were expected to work in the 70s that, like, was a great thing, or do you have more complex feelings about that?
Well, I've done it myself, and one of the worst experiences is spending a year doing an album. I mean, I spent 3 years doing the second Stone Roses album, and it was fucking hell, you know. No, I'm not saying, you know, do it in 2 weeks kind of thing. I mean, most records, when I look at my diaries, most records I do are like 50 days, 54 days. It depends now, because the whole technique has gone. I'm talking 54 days, 12-hour days in the studio. I'm not talking about sitting in your bedroom with the headphones on doing the vocals and that kind of thing. It's all changed now with the technology, like, you know, people sending files to each other rather than assembling in a room, and, you know, almost rather than having a producer. You know, a lot of bands think, "Oh, I can produce myself. That must be easy. Anyone can do that." You know, but you try it, you know.
Barry Andrews, what was the dynamics at the time of the Go-To album?
Well, again, it was a lot of fun, even Go-To. I mean, Barry was, what could I say, outspoken. I mean, it wasn't aggressively disagreeing. Was I surprised when he left? No, I wasn't surprised when he left, I suppose. It wasn't bad vibes. I mean, Barry, you know, the rest of the band let Barry do 2 songs on the record. I think we did 3. I'm sure there's a third.
I think there were 5 recorded.
There was 5 recorded. There you go. So
Sargasso Bar and other bits and pieces.
Sargasso Bar. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, Us Being Us. And
has that been released?
It's on. I think now it's on Many Cupboards, but it's been on bootleg for years and years. But it's there around.
I know we did a lot of more than what went on the record, and you know, I had to actually phone Barry up and tell him that we were dropping one of his songs from the album. You know, you only got 2 on, what, Super Tough and My Weapon, wasn't it? Yeah.
Things Fall to Bits is the one I couldn't remember. That's the 5th track.
Bits and Bits and
Things Fall to Bits. Bits and Bits and Bits.
Yeah, but Barry was great, of course. I mean, totally unique keyboard player. I mean, you know, and that Lawrence piano, I'd still never seen another one. That little piano he used to have, that is called, made by Lawrence, and it was like a mini upright grand, an electric, and it was all beaten up. I mean, all the keys worked because he could play it, and it just had a pickup, and he used to put this treble booster. It was a Dan Armstrong or Dan Electro treble booster. Boom, and he'd plug that in and then plug the jack in, and he'd hit the key, the keyboard, and it would like hurt your ears because it was so bright. But it was great because it balanced with the guitar, you know. So you got Andy's guitar, which is really chunky, bright and sharp, and the piano had to compete with it. Not as far as Barry is concerned, he had to go one more, you know, and overtake. But no, it was great, and the Krumar organ and all that, and Dog Breath. You remember that when they did Old Grey Whistle Test, and he wrote Dog Breath on the back of his, and I'm like, what's that? You know, and I think when he went to the BBC, he had the Krumar organ, which he used to turn, you know, swivel up and down, and it didn't have a cover on it; it was just open. You know, it didn't, and the BBC insisted that he had it, because, like, you know, health and safety, you can't have an open electronic thing there. And they put a Perspex cover on top of his organ because they were frightened of it exploding.
How do you imagine that Skylarking would have sounded had you produced it? If you'd produced it instead of Todd Rundgren, how do you think that?
It probably
Would
would
you
have
imagine?
sounded like 25 o'clock, I suppose.
All right. I heard that when Andy Partridge upgraded to CD, that he gave you his entire record collection and fitted you in a car with it. Do you remember that story? And do you remember anything that he gave over to you?
Yeah, of course I do. Yeah, it's funny because we never spoke about it. And one day, as I say, like if I worked at Rockford, I'd pop in for a cup of tea, and CDs had come out, and Andy had all his albums stacked up, and he was going to put them in the shed or something. And Marianne, his wife, she said, "Oh, can't you get rid of these albums? Do you want them, John?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And Andy says, "You can't." And I started going through them like one at a time. And he says, No, you can't go through them. He said, you got to take all of them or none. You can't just take a few. And I looked, no, I don't know how many there were, probably about 500 records. And I said, all right, I'll have them all. And so I had an MG, an MGB, and we filled the whole car with these albums. And I've still got a few, yeah. I mean, because there was a lot of stuff there. I mean, there was Residents, and I remember the Residents, which I've still got. Just lots of records. Barbarella. He loved Barbarella, and he'd done a hand-painted sleeve to the Barbarella album, the soundtrack. Yeah, I've still got most of them, I think. And I don't know whether to ask if he wants them back.
He hasn't got a record player, there's no point.
He hasn't got a record player, he'll probably say, no, I don't want them, you get them. When they gave me a contract for doing the Dukes of Stratosphear, they send you a contract, in the post, it's before emails and stuff in the post. They send you a contract, and in the letter it says, if there's anything you disagree with, please let me know. And so I read through the contract. I don't have a lawyer or anything, I just do it myself, and usually I just sign it and don't even read it. And I'm reading through it, and Andy had just told me, he said, hey, guess what? They're going to release it in purple vinyl. It's going to be in green and purple psychedelic vinyl. Isn't that great? And then when I get the contract, it says, you get like 1% royalty, not 2 or 3 or 4. You get 1% royalty. And if it's pressed in coloured vinyl, you get half royalties. So I said, no, sorry, I'll cross that clause out. And that was what it was. It was just basically Virgin were totally, would you say, rip-off people. So yeah, like a coloured vinyl, you get half royalties or no royalties, because coloured vinyl is a promotional thing. It's used for promotion. And the other thing that happens with Virgin and other record companies is you get a certain percentage for doing the, 1 or 2 points. Miserable, really. It doesn't amount to much unless you sell millions. And when CDs come out, if it's a compilation, you only get half royalties. So when CDs come out, they would do the album and add extra tracks and then pay everyone half royalties, because it's a compilation, it's got extra tracks on. And so everyone, the artists as well, would get half royalties, and the record company would get the other half.
So when Virgin kind of cottoned on to the fact that they could shove a couple of extra tracks on a CD, they could put the Big Express on with three extra tracks on, suddenly everyone gets half the royalties.
Correct.
Jeez, that's outrageous.
I know.
That's absolutely outrageous. So for things like Explode Together, you've only got half royalties because it's a collection.
Because they consider compilations as not being proper records. They're not proper albums. The story with the Stone Roses is that when they signed their contract, CDs had just come out, and CDs were considered a bit weird and sort of promotional items. And 12-inch singles, well, that's just for clubs. That's a promotional thing. It's not the real record. So they never got any royalties for CDs or 12-inch singles. You only get records for 7-inch singles and the album, the vinyl album.
Just outrageous. Absolutely outrageous.
It depends on what studio. Rockfield's great because you can live there. It's one of the few places where you can go residential. I like the residential thing because you're all under the same roof. You don't have to get the bus home, and you don't get in late in the morning, and you can, go to bed when you want and get up when you want. So I like Rockfield and Residentials, although I do like Rack Studios in London. Mixing, I don't know now. Mixing's all different now with computers and stuff and plugins, so the main thing about mixing is the monitoring, really, is the speakers and what you're listening to. If you trust and know what you're listening to, then you should get a good result. And usually you find bad mixes are because of bad monitoring, not really hearing.
Your memories of working on Mark Owen's Green Man album with Dave Gregory?
Oh, yeah. God, good question. Yeah, Mark Owen. Mark Owen came about at the time that Take That, I mean, to be honest, I'm not a big Take That fan, of course, by any means. But Mark Owen, they'd split up, and what could I say? I had a lot of pressure to do the record because, you know, it was going to sell, basically. And they wanted to do it quickly by October so they could release it at Christmas, because next year was Robbie Williams was coming. And so they wanted to get Mark's record out of the way. And basically we had free range. I did it with a guy called Craig Leon, and Craig is more of a songwriter than what I am. And so Craig helped Mark with the songs and the orchestrations, you know. And basically we had free reign, infinite budget, really. We were in Abbey Road, in all 3 studios in Abbey Road. And we had orchestras, we had the gospel choir, we had Clem Burke from Blondie and Dave Gregory from XTC. Clem Burke came over thinking he was joining XTC. When he heard Dave Gregory, it's like, oh, I've got to do this gig because I'm going to be the drummer of XTC, you know. And then when he got in the studio, it's like, well, actually, it's not XTC, it's Mark Owen. But no, we had good fun, and I don't know, whatever you think, we had good fun doing it. It was a good recording exercise, really, and pretty successful. I mean, whatever, yeah. It was great. Mark's great. It was lovely, yeah.
So didn't Dave end up working with Blondie shortly after that?
I think so, yeah.
So they must have got on pretty well together, Clem and David.
Yeah, they did, yeah. And Dave did string arrangements and things, I think, yeah.
I was wondering about Bill Nelson. Do you have any stories about Be-Bop Deluxe at all that you remember?
Yeah. How long have we got?
Is Mike in the room? Mike, one of our co-organisers, is a massive Bill Nelson and Red Noise and Be-Bop Deluxe fan. Michael,
yeah.
Are you listening?
Well, anyway, Be-Bop Deluxe, I don't know how many people know Be-Bop. I probably got the XTC job, first off, because of Be-Bop Deluxe, I think, because at that time I'd done 2 Be-Bop Deluxe albums, and they were the greatest band in the world at that time. And that's probably how I got the XTC things. I think I ended up doing about 7 albums with Bill, and it was great. I mean, me and Be-Bop Deluxe, we spent the 70s together, really. The second half of the 70s, you know, we went to south of France, I did about 7 albums, and, you know, and I saw Bill recently, went up to Yorkshire, and he's great. I don't know if anyone knows, you know, Bill's, since he left Be-Bop Deluxe, or they split up, he's made, God knows, 100, if not 200 albums himself, in his room upstairs. And he's great. I mean, all the albums sound the same. He's got the same sounds on them. You know, some are instrumental, some are songs. But yeah, he deserves a lot more recognition than what he gets. But he does lock himself away, you know, and just stays up in Yorkshire, never circulates really. And never has guest musicians. You know, he loves people asking him to play. You know, David Sylvian and Harold Bard and those sort of people. And really, Bill should have played with other people and just expanded himself a bit more. But he just loves sitting at home making his own records, and they sell. You know, they sell. He can make 1,000 CDs, and within a month they're all sold. So he's doing good.
For me, live, Terry was the driving force. So just interested to know what he was like in the studio.
Still the same, the driving force, yeah. You know, he sets the tempo and sets the pulse of the music. I mean, you know, no click tracks, no metronome or anything like that. It was always... No, there was never a click track. He was the click track, yeah, the human click track kind of thing.
Colin and Andy tell him how to play, or did he just get the song and play his own way?
Andy would make suggestions. I don't think Colin would really make suggestions, but Andy wouldn't discipline him. He wouldn't say, oh, you've got to do it like this. He would say, oh, that bit's good. Or why don't you try that on the floor, Tom, or something. You know, I mean, it was a shared thing, really. You know, I might say something. I might say, oh, that's too slow. Can't you play that bit faster or something? You know, that's what it's about, really. But no, I mean, he takes direction. You know, if he'd say, no, I'm not going to do that, it's not going to work. You know, you might as well go home. You know, it's like, so it's always a collaboration, you could say, in the studio, you know?
Just a joking question, but I just wondered if you have any insights on where these master tracks might be to give tips to Andy on how he can hunt them down?
I've got no idea. Tell me, what have they lost? I don't know.
Well,
I know that there's no white music tapes, is that right? I don't know.
There are a couple of albums we're missing the master tapes for, and if people are around tomorrow, they might find out something very interesting about one of the missing albums, which has recently resurfaced. I'm not saying anything, but there are a couple of albums where the master tapes have gone and they've only got the 2-track stereos. So that, yeah.
I don't know.
No.
I'm looking forward
you haven't got
to
any at home.
No, I'm looking forward to the White Music Stephen Wilson remix. Actually, I mean, good luck to him.
White Music's happening. White Music's happening at some point. That's been working on for a while. Go To, I think, is still missing, isn't it? Or maybe it's turned up. There are a couple of the later albums which you were involved with, which.
They tried Abbey Road for Go To.
Well, weirdly,
that's where it was recorded and mixed there.
Yeah, they've turned up in the maddest of places. I don't know if everybody knows the story, but the tapes for Skylarking turned up at Capitol. Capitol got nothing to do with XTC ever. But
that's where they recorded it.
But it's because they had the Todd Rundgren archive.
Yeah.
And Rundgren always said he never had the tapes, but he did. They were in the archive, his archive at Capitol Records.
It shouldn't be too difficult. You only got to go through the diary and say, where were these? If you want Go To, the first place I'd go is Abbey Road.
Sure.
Even though it was bloody 40 years ago. You know, there's probably still there.
Yeah, I'm just curious, what's your favorite XTC song?
Oh, that's a great question.
I knew that was good.
Go on.
My favourite XTC song?
Are you allowed a favourite?
I'm going to say something really off the wall here. You'll probably agree, or you go, oh yeah, it is. Complicated Game on Drums and Wires.
Yes! Totally.
I still don't, you know, it still makes me shiver. And, you know, maybe it's not a song, but I love Complicated Games and what Andy does and what Lily White did and everything. I think it's great. You could say there's two things that make the sound of a band is the vocalist and the drummer. The vocalist and the snare drum. No one plays like XTC, really. I mean, those early records, you know, White Music, Go Plus, no one really plays that music anymore.